might be there was technologies or like similar thing that we are developing right now somewhere else in the Milky Way or outside, but they destroyed themselves. Like,
Yeah, I've
because
heard
when
that.
they reach to the adolescence that we are right now, they could not continue and they destroyed and went extinct. So do you see such scenario might be happening if we don't regulate what the technology that we have?
Our common humanity becomes greater, and that's what my new book, The AI 10 Commandments, is all about. And our ability to kill each other also becomes greater because the same drivers are pushing both of those things in the same direction. So, yes, there are existential potential benefits and existential potential risks. I'm quite certain that people who are saying now, oh, our machines will never be creative, are going to be having very creative, very thoughtful, very deep, even romantic relationships with machines.
There was a report a few months ago about the AI system or robots talking to his owner or her owner, whatever. So
Yeah.
I think he was telling that I would like to unplug you or turn off you, and he was threatening the owner that I will reveal all of your secrets, for
Yeah.
example. So it may happen. Is we are
Yeah.
laughing, but if it happens, so what we can do? Welcome to Houshivar podcast. Today, I am delighted to welcome Jamie Metzel, one of the world's leading thinkers on the future of humanity and emerging technologies. Jamie is a technology futurist, geopolitical expert, investor, author, and public intellectual. He has served on the U.S. National Security Council, in the U.S. State Department, and in the United Nations. He is the founder and chair of the One Shared World, a global movement focused on addressing humanity's shared challenges. And he has served on the World Health Organization's or WHO International Advisory Committee on Human Genome Editing. Throughout his career, Jamie has worked on the intersection of sciences, technologies, policy, and global governance. His best-selling books, Hacking Darwin, that I will show you the book, and the Superconvergence, that we have the privilege to translate it to Farsi, explore how advances in genetics, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, robotics, and computing are transforming our society, fundamentally reshape the future of our species. We are living through a remarkable moment in history. Artificial intelligence is advancing in an unprecedented pace. Gene editing technologies are giving us new powers over biology, and multiple technological revolutions revolutionizing our societies and may fundamentally reshape the future of our species. These developments offer extraordinary opportunities for humanity, from curing disease and extending healthy lives to solving some of the humanity's greatest challenges. But they are also raise profound questions about ethics, morality, governance, human identity, and even the long-term survival of our species. Today, we will explore these opportunities and challenges and discuss what the future may hold for humanity. Jamie, welcome to Houshivar. It's a pleasure for me to host you in Houshivar.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm delighted that my one of my books is going to be translated into Farsi. My books have been translated into 25 languages, but never Farsi. And I am such a, I mean, Iranian and civilization, Persian civilization, has made such enormous contributions to world culture and literature and art, and so I'm really thrilled, especially at this very painful time, regardless of anybody's politics. When so many people are in pain, we should all be in pain. So thank you for reaching out, thank you for connecting, and thank you for translating my book.
Our pleasure. Also, thank you for letting us translate the book. It's a really good book, and you are well known inside Iran because of the Hacking Darwin, this book that already, I think, I'm not sure it's translated or not, but the Iranians, the scholars, they know this book, and I
Great.
already talked about this book in my podcast as well in some parts, and I will talk about the new book as well. But Before I ask my first question, I will focus today mostly on a little bit on hacking Darwin because this is a little bit older, like 5, 6 years ago, but mostly on the new book, Superconvergence. But before I start, I would like to read some of the praise on the back of the hacking Darwin from Nature. So, propulsive, fact-packed, and engrossing, Metzel has a knack both for clarifying granular scientific and moral complexities and for seeing the bigger picture. This seeing pictures, like a big picture, is very crucial, I think, for humanity, that you are one of the best persons to look at these few angles together. So as a first question, so let's go to your career a little bit. Your career has taken you from diplomacy and national security to biotechnology, genetics, and AI and futurism. What experience most shaped your view of humanity's future? So, if you go back a little bit, so what type of factors shaped your thinking that you are here right now?
So thank you so much. It's a wonderful question and a wonderful first question. And for me, I would say in big picture, it's seeing the worst of humanity and seeing the best of humanity. I'm a born optimist. I've been an optimist for my entire life. But I'm the son of a refugee. My father came to the United States as a refugee after the war at age 13 and had so much death and destruction on that side of the family. And then when I was 18, I went and I worked in a refugee camp on the Thai-Cambodian border after the Vietnam War. And in all of those experiences and those families' experiences, I saw just how terrible things can be and how cruel humans can be to one another. But I also saw that even in those darkest times, and whether it's Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz or many of the Cambodian genocide survivors who I met when I was working in the refugee camp, and then when I was spending 2 years living in Cambodia in the early 90s, it made me, I think, hopefully everybody realize how what magical, wonderful things our species is capable of at its best, at our best. And so that certainly is a very important part of my history. More specifically, in the 1990s, I was working for President Clinton on the National Security Council, and my then boss and now friend Richard Clarke he's now at that time unknown, but now famous for being kind of the Cassandra of 9/11, the person who predicted everything but was, as hard as he tried, powerless to stop it. And Dick always used to say that the key to efficacy in Washington and in life is to try to address problems before many other people can see them. And so this was 30 years ago, and I thought deeply about what that was, and I looked around the world, and I came to believe very strongly that what we now see as what we now call AI, genetics, and biotechnology, the names were different in those days, that the convergence of those technologies was going to have profound implications, not just for the things that we do, but for our species more generally. And that, starting from that spark 30 years ago, I became really obsessed in educating myself at first and talking to thousands and thousands of people. And then when I was ready, I started writing books, both fiction and nonfiction. And as I write my books and I do a lot of speaking, have a lot of conversations, I'm always saying, well, this story, human genetic engineering, it's a really important story for us, but it's just a small piece of the bigger story of human engineered intelligence and re-engineered life. And let me tell you about that story. So that was how Hacking Darwin became Superconvergence. And now my most recent book just came out, called the AI 10 Commandments, because in my talks, I'm saying, well, we're at the verge of these radical technological capabilities, but the thing that will determine whether we use them for good or for ill is not necessarily the technologies themselves. It's us, who we are, what we stand for. And now I'm actually just completing my next book, which is another novel, which is coming out in February 2027, which I hope you'll also translate to Farsi. And it's called Virtuosa, and it explores the intersection of AI, robotics, and classical music, because I think the next frontier is asking ourselves, what does it mean to be human at a revolutionary quantum leap moment like this? And my answer, there are some people who are pessimists who say that humans are the new Neanderthals. I'm the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. I think that humans are capable of unlimited, wonderful things, and that we'll have new opportunities, just like you and I are having this conversation, thanks to our ancestors controlling fire, discovering agriculture, and building civilizations and all these other things. So I'm very optimistic, but the future doesn't play out in a positive way on its own. We all have a job in building the kind of futures that we'd like to inhabit.
That's great, fantastic. So I think I will ask about these two books at the end of our conversation. So I'm
Yeah,
really
sure.
like it. I forgot to also thank Professor Singer for connecting us. So I
Yeah,
listened to
wonderful
your,
man.
yeah,
Yep.
to he has been my guest for two times, and Kashia as well. She was my
Oh,
guest.
she's amazing. Yeah.
I really enjoyed how they think, and also the books
Yes.
they're writing, and the philosophy and morality
Yeah,
they
love them.
encourage people. If you go back to hacking Darwin, so I will talk about this last book, which was because I like the concept that you talk with Peter Singer about the consciousness of the robots or the future of AI. That's also I'm really interested, and I talked several guests I had about consciousness, and
Yeah.
I would like to ask. But before that, let's go to hacking Darwin.
Yeah.
So it's published in 2019, I guess, 2020, around that time. Almost five,
Yeah.
6 years passed. So if
Yeah.
you look back 7 years, this question also came from one of my friends that asked me to ask you that if you look back at the key concepts of that book, that ideas that you wanted to discuss and show that it may happen, what surprised you now if you look back at that book,
Yeah.
and what's really moved faster or slower when you look back those some of the technology, for example, gene editing you discuss in that book. But I would like to hear from you that what you think from the past that it happened or what not
Yeah.
in 6 years, and
And
we
so,
come back
yes,
to
yeah. So it's
convergence.
actually 7 years now because the hardback edition came out in 2019 and the paperback came out in 2020. And so for me, it's a test. If you're writing a nonfiction book, if it's 7 years later and you look back or you're doing an updated edition and your thesis, your core thesis is wrong, that means that either the world changed in a really crazy way or you wrote a bad book with, and if you look back and your thesis is right, but there are just more examples making the case, supporting the case that you made, then that's a good book. And so that certainly has been my experience. As a matter of fact, when the book was already on its way, it was already in beginning its printing process in late 2018 when the announcement was made from Hong Kong that He Jiankui, the Chinese biophysicist, had all read that the first two CRISPR babies had already been born. I called my publisher and I said, I've got bad news and good news. The bad news is that the world's first CRISPR babies have been born, and my book is on the future of human genome editing. And it has to reference, like, you can't come out with a book and not reference that this thing has already happened. The good news is I fully predicted everything. I said it's coming. I said it's going to happen in China. I explained why. I said it's coming soon. And I had a list of 5 target genes that I thought would be the most likely first targets. And one of them, CCR5, was actually the gene that He Jiankui targeted. So the good news, at least for the hardback edition, was we don't need to make huge changes just after the section where I'm making all of these predictions. Then we need for the hardback just to say add a paragraph. And this was, and on this day it was announced that, and then we did more in the paperback edition. And so I think I'm not wildly surprised by the incredible progress that we have made. Certainly, the COVID-19 experience pushed a number of things forward, and it pushed the level of investment into biotechnology as a field forward. And then that was exciting. And then there was a dip that we're now starting to come out of. But I was never saying that we're going to have everybody's going to be genetically modified by 2026. I mean, this was always going to be a thing where there was going to be incredible science, and then things were going to start happening in little pieces, and those pieces, those little points, would add up. So it's incredibly exciting that we have the first FDA approved gene therapies. I was a member of, as you mentioned, the World Health Organization Expert Advisory Committee on Human Genome Editing. And we were very strong in our recommendation that although we or I may be very excited about what human genome editing can do to help humans in the future, we're not ready for it now. And so to do it now prematurely would be, in my view, a form of human experimentation. But just this week, we had a new preprint released by Dieter Egli at Columbia University talking about the base editing of pre-implanted human embryos, which was done with far more precision than any other kind of embryo editing to date. That doesn't mean that everyone's going to be genome edited right away, but it does mean that as we do the cost benefit analysis of different interventions that we might make, that when we're weighing removing a deadly genetic mutation that would force a child to live a very short, painful life and make a very small change from abnormal to normal, and let that same kid live to be 100 years old with 3 generations of children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, that would seem something worthwhile. And so we're moving in that direction. So I'm not entirely surprised one way or another. I'm encouraged by the progress we've made. I'm encouraged that we don't have a willy-nilly Wild West. And I think that things are moving forward well. But to move forward well is not just about science and technology. It's also about public understanding, education, engagement, empowerment, yes, government regulation, but governance more broadly. So we need to think of all of this as a jigsaw puzzle, and we need to make sure that we get all the pieces can fit together.
That's great. I fully agree. So I think one of the purpose of this podcast is also education basis, is not for profit.
Yeah.
So I don't gain much. Just my purpose is just to be a bridge between scientists,
Yep.
philosophers, and also maybe some of the Iranians. I think
Yeah.
looking at the world as a whole thing. So I think we are all human. So I
Yes.
think about the future also very interesting, because I was summarizing one of the books called Fluke by Brian Krause. Maybe
Mhm.
Brian. So I think it's hard to predict future because of
Yes.
all the flukes that happens. That uh, it's hard to predict for many reasons. But I think I'm happy that some of the predictions that you had in Hiking Darwin came true, and some of the things that you predicted also in the super convergence, that I'm also working on some of those fields. It seems it's
Great.
coming through maybe soon, even after
Yeah.
your publication, maybe came through some of them.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
So what I will say is I've been making predictions for decades, and I always want somebody to say, well, you've been making predictions, I'm going to do an audit. I mean, I don't think anybody cares enough about me to look at every prediction I've made over the last 30 plus years. But I like to believe and do believe that I would come out of an audit well, that many and many of the things that I've been saying and writing, and sometimes you're so successful making predictions. And like when I started saying certain things about the future of AI, the future of genetics, biotechnology, people would say, that's crazy. That's never going to happen. And then when you succeed, and everybody now with AI, everybody is talking about AI, it's normalized. Then people say, "Oh, you predicted that." Everybody knows that's true.
yeah,
So it's a mark of success. I mean, I have enough ideas to last 10 lifetimes, but it's a mark of success is if you predict something so well that the thing that sounded crazy to everybody becomes just common knowledge that people think, "Oh, everybody knows that." That's a mark of success and not failure.
yeah. That's interesting. Maybe I'm not sure we are in the same age or a little bit different, but I think I remember the time that there was no internet. And now
Yes.
after 20, 30 years, internet is just our kids, they
Yep.
don't understand what was the
Yep.
time that there was no internet, or When I was a PhD student, there was no Talon or CRISPR-Cas9. It was just zinc finger, and then it was very
Yeah,
hard to edit. It was just mostly gene targeting. And then it was
yeah,
very cumbersome and then laborious to do that. And now, after 10 years, even a kit can be sold and any student can
yes,
do it. Yeah. So we
yeah,
cannot
yeah,
imagine how technology
yes.
progressed during the last decade or so.
Yeah,
One,
and that's the point of the term
yeah.
superconvergence. Technology begets more technology. Innovation begets more innovation. Education begets more
Mm,
education, and people obviously beget people. So we have four times more people on planet Earth than we did 100 years ago. We've gone from 15% literacy 100 years ago to 85% literacy today. So we have all of these hungry human minds who are all contributing, and we're connected through these networks. So nobody needs to waste time like our ancestors did inventing things in one place that had already been invented someplace else. So there are conditions. They're almost I have mathematical equations in superconvergence describing this process of acceleration and why.
yes, before I move to the next topic, so I would like to get the clarification on this.
Yeah,
Because of the gene editing that happened on those babies, because of the
yeah,
HIV prevention, which is not very well good justified, and it seems is immoral, and because we don't
yes,
know the off
right,
target or what may happen for the next
yes,
generations. But now we are in a better place that we can maybe predict off targets, or at least for the disease that are lethal or genetic disease
right,
that cause a very serious issue and pain and suffering for the babies.
yes.
You think maybe it will be soon justified that maybe we can do gene editing or base editing on some of the genetic disease, that if the
Yes.
baby borns, it will be
Yeah.
suffering. I'm not saying that it will be widespread, but at least it can be
Yeah.
justified for some.
Yes. And my answer to that is yes. What you mean, and we mean by the word soon in that sentence, that's a
Hmm.
dial that can be moved in one direction or another. And that's why I'm such a ferocious critic of He Jiankui, because the first step of the editing of a pre-implanted human embryo should have been in the kind of very prescribed limited conditions like you just described in your question. I think that would have been a very good first step. And so if we said it's a genetic dominant single gene mutation dominant disorder where the parents have no other alternative to have genetically directly related offspring. I mean, there have been many reports that have talked about the specific conditions in which it would be justified. And so, as our ability to do these edits precisely increases in the right circumstances, which is the absolute opposite of what happened in China, which was kind of the wrong circumstances in many different ways. But in the right circumstances, I think it will be justified. And that doesn't mean that it'll be justified next year. It may be 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but I think it will be justified. And then when people say, oh, but if we justify it once, it's going to be off to the races and slippery slope. I mean, I just think that a slippery slope is not a well-defined argument. I think what we should do is make cost-benefit analyses of different interventions. And if for every step that we might take, we say, well, what happens if there's a slippery slope? If I'm eating 2 eggs for breakfast, oh, that's a slippery slope to eating 10,000 eggs. And I'm in New York City, so sorry for the sirens. And if I eat 10,000 eggs, I'm going to die of like Cool Hand Luke. I'm going to die of or be harmed by eating too many eggs. And so I just think that we should make arguments based on goals and cost benefit analyses and trade offs.
That's exactly, yeah. That needs maybe the regulatory agencies, government,
Yes.
policies,
Yeah.
education. So, Jamie, in one of the central themes of hacking Darwin was that humans would increasingly taking control of our own evolution. So for
Yes.
thousands of years, environment was shaping us. So we know that we evolved like in
Yeah.
desert in Africa, and then we were controlled by our environment
Yeah.
hardly. Now we are maybe shaping our environment, and then not reacting to that. So do you think we are now already crossed that threshold? So we are changing our evolution? Maybe in the long term, if
Yeah.
you look at it, we are not formed by environment, but we form our environment.
Yeah, that process has been happening for about 1 million years so far, and now it will accelerate. When our ancestors learned to control fire and therefore to cook food, we had a process that happened inside of our bodies that we took outside of our bodies. And with that easier way of digesting particularly animal proteins, our ancestors could reallocate energy from digestion to thinking, and then we could build more complex social structures. So the controlling of fire, which is technology, changed our biology. When we started the age of agriculture, I mean, that ushered in with domesticated animals our exposures to all of these pathogens. And then we biologically changed as a species with this kind of intimate exposure to domesticated animals. As people got particularly further from the equator, they needed to find other animal protein sources. And so we started to drink milk, and our species was designed to only be able to drink milk for a little while and then to stop drinking milk. But there were some of us who had this mutation connected to the domestication of animals and to all the other technological means that allowed our species to go further and further from our initial comfort zones of tropical Africa. And so that also transformed our biology. So that is the history of our species, but that will accelerate, and it will accelerate in all sorts of ways. Maybe it will be through genome editing, and maybe it will be through some kind of synthetic biology pandemic, and we're going to need to very quickly change future generations in order to survive. Maybe it will be that future humans, which I think is quite likely, will live their entire lives in space, and we're not designed to do that in our current form, and so we may need to make some kind of changes to our biology for survivability. So I think that is happening. It is an inherently slow process because of human procreation and many other reasons, but it's getting a lot faster than it's been over the last 1 million years.
Great, thank you. So some people, as you better know, that argue that now is more cultural inheritance. So we move
Yes.
like to pass our cultures to our kids, and also the memes that
Yep.
Richard Dawkins also brought. So this kind of thing is more shaping us than maybe the nature. So that's also
Yeah, I
happening.
agree with that. I agree with
Yeah.
that completely. But I think that those two things are connected. I mean, is living in space being biologically a little bit different in order to live in space, is that a biological change or a cultural change? Well,
Mhm.
obviously, it's primarily a cultural exchange, because getting to space, represents, again, 1 million years since from controlling fire, or you can make it more recent, 12,000 years from planting the first seed to have living in the International Space Station, or maybe a little more than that to people living their entire lives in space. So, for sure, cultural evolution and biological evolution for our species are deeply, deeply intertwined.
Thank you. I'm moving a little fast for the audience.
Yeah,
That's also, I would like to cover more about the superconvergence, even though the books are related. Some of the concepts
yeah,
that was
yeah,
covered in Hacking Darwin also expanded in the
yeah,
superconvergence.
yeah.
But before I start, I would like to also read a praise for superconvergence. This is very important. So from Siddhartha Mukherjee from the Columbia University, the author of The Gene and Intimate History. So in Superconvergence, Jamie Metzel takes reader on a magical journey through the science of intersecting genetics, biotech, and AI revolutions, deeply explore the implications and challenges us to think creatively and proactively about what comes next. Very few books are absolute must reads. This is one. So I think Iranians also, for my audience from Iran, most of you, you know Siddhartha Mukherjee, and it doesn't need for him to praise, but already a book is speaking for itself. But this book is for the English speakers or audience. So I put a link to Amazon or some of the major bookshops. I highly recommend you buy and read it. I already read it a few times for translating and for Iranians, so it will be translated by my own like publication outside Iran, and for Iranians inside there is another publisher to publish this. Hopefully we will have some sessions to discuss like between us about the concept of the book after publication. Thank you again for letting us translate this book.
Well,
Um,
and if I could just say,
sure.
Mehdi, as I said in the beginning, I have such respect for Iran, Iranian history, Iranian culture, Iranian people. And I know even in these very, very difficult times that learning and growing, it's an act of defiance. It's a statement about what it means to be a human. It's equivalent to what I was saying before about my family's experience in Europe and my personal observations in terrible conditions in Cambodia and in
Yeah.
the refugee camp on the Thai-Cambodian border. So I just really appreciate that people in Iran in very, very, very difficult circumstances, and my heart goes out to all of the people and all of the suffering. But that people in that context are saying, well, what does it mean to be a human? It means to live and to learn and to love and to still be fighting for those things. I think it's very special, and I imagine even your viewers with the internet outages that have been so omnipresent have been starved from this kind of dialogue. So it's truly my honor to share my thoughts and with the people of Iran
Thank you
and
so
the
much,
Iranians
Jamie.
here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a lot. And then for your warm words, I did transfer it to Iranians. And also, I have to say that now it's a conflict between U.S. and Iran, but the American viewers that view this, they have to know that the majority of Iranians, they are against this war. And then it's not
Yes.
a war between people like Iranians, American, they love each other and then they like, but the government or the politic is different. That I have to say this is not the war that Iranians chose, and then hopefully it comes soon to a peace agreement. At least it's very hard time for Iranians. And the blockage of the internet, that's another thing. Even YouTube is filtered. Not all of my audience, they can see or view this
Yeah.
freely. They have to use VPNs or whatever.
Yeah.
So hopefully everything comes to an end for Iranians. And thank you for your words. It's a great pleasure to hear that. So in Superconvergence, you argue that biotechnology, genetics, and AI are no longer developing independently. Like maybe 20 years ago, I think we may not have that AI much, but at least genetic or biotechnology, they are not new. But now they are converging to each other, and now they are supporting and empowering each other. Um, why is this convergence different from a few decades ago?
It's not different in the sense that there is only one. We talk about nature.
Mm,
We think about physics and chemistry and biology. Nature doesn't divide itself into those categories, and there is only one technology. And again, that's what superconvergence means. Every technology is embedded in every other technology. Controlling fire is embedded in getting to the point for the agricultural revolution. And agriculture is embedded in our ability to grow civilizations and writing systems. And therefore, the languages that we are using that underpin the computer revolution and the AI revolution are our ancient traditions. And whether it's the computer languages written in what we call Latin letters, which you're probably better called Phoenician letters, or the numbers, which we call Arabic numbers, but maybe would be better called Hindu numbers. But regardless, these are all ancient symbols and codes that are then enabling, and our ancient principles of mathematics developed over thousands of years underpin this computer revolution that is allowing us to use AI to understand these very complex patterns in natural, biological, and unbiological systems, and then learn to excuse me, to manipulate those to do certain things, and whether it's to cure diseases or do anything else. So it's all very exciting, and so it's all these things are coming together because all of the technologies are embedded in each other. That's the point of superconvergence.
So when you talk about AI, you connect them to genetic or biotechnology and also about the ethics around AI and the morality. So it has been advanced dramatically, especially in the recent years. So even 1.5 years ago, I didn't know about ChatGPT, but I know I'm using hugely, like for preparation for the interview or even asking questions. Don't Google much now. I just ask maybe ChatGPT. We are maybe very dependent now, gradually maybe to this AI. So if you want to say that, what excites you about the AI advancement, fast advancement,
Yeah,
maybe looking at the general AI in the future
yeah,
or how it moves, and when we talk
yeah.
about the consciousness as well, because I know your the book about the Ten Commanders you wrote
Right.
with help of ChatGPT. But
Yep.
anyway, what excites you and what maybe concerns you about this?
Yeah, yeah. And so my feeling is what I tell everybody is if you're not excited about all of this, you're missing the point. And if you're not
Yes.
scared of all this, you're also missing the point because, like every technology, this has an exciting upside and a scary potential downside. So there are many things that I'm excited about. Obviously, improving healthcare, making agriculture more efficient so we can grow more foods that we need with less inputs of land and water and energy and fertilizer. But I'm also excited for what these technologies can do simply to more evenly distribute the fruits of knowledge. I mean, you and I are so fortunate that we've had these wonderful educations, and it feels like it's our doing. Like you worked really hard, I worked really hard to do things, but really, we are inheritors of thousands of years of cultural inheritance, as we've discussed, which is the most important thing. But there are lots of people who are, I'm sure, more talented inherently than you or I, who don't have that access, who only have limited access and bad schools and no access to great libraries or other resources. And so the more that we can distribute the goods of education and health and connectivity, that's going to be incredible because right now we are taxed. Everyone in the world is taxed because we have billions of people who are inherently incredibly talented who don't have the opportunity for their benefit and for our benefit to realize their full potential. That doesn't just harm them, that harms us. So when we can have individualized tutors for everybody, in addition to the human teachers, which will always be important, when we can have local health providers buttressed by access to the best knowledge from anywhere, I think that's probably the single thing that I'm most excited about. But I'm also excited about, like I said, I think that the number of problems that we could solve is virtually unlimited. And so I love the idea both of humans being freed to focus on bigger and bigger and more important and potentially beneficial challenges, and that we're going to have science that will accelerate because we're going to have hypothesis generation, because we're going to have self-driving laboratories. So we're just going to be able to learn a lot. And always people are saying, "Oh, we're going to come to the end of knowledge." There's no end of knowledge. We're in a massive universe. We know nothing about it. We are humans. I mean, I think I would say we understand about 3% of the full complexity of our own biology. So we know very little. We've made a lot of progress with this little knowledge, uh, but I think that we should be excited about that if we can manage all of this wisely, because the same technologies that can help us can be used to harm us. And obviously, with autonomous killer robots proliferating everywhere, with dehumanization, with over reliance. And that's why I'm so against people talking about, I don't believe in the concept of artificial general intelligence where AI can do every cognitive task humans can do. That's preposterous in my view, because our intelligence is embodied. It represents almost 4 billion years of embodied evolution. It's just a different thing. I don't even like the word artificial intelligence. I think it's alternate intelligence, or machine intelligence maybe is a better term, which uses our cultural, digitized cultural record as a training set, partial training set, but it's different. We're not creating artificial humans. We're giving birth, maybe, to some other thing, and we're going to have to figure out what's our relationship with that other thing. So there's a lot to be incredibly excited for. There's a lot to be terrified of, and the name of the game is how do we optimize the benefits and minimize the harms.
That's great. Just to add what you mentioned about empathy and sympathy, mostly empathy about other people. So
Yes.
Robert Sapolsky was my guest for 4 times. I
Wow.
think it's a famous thing determined. The book is here. So I think
Yeah.
we talk about, and Greg Carousel is a famous philosopher. They don't believe in free will and then the moral responsibility from the perspective that praise or they they just critics of meritocracy, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for the audience, if you like, you can go and watch those. I think we did last year a few sessions, and we had like with lawyers as well. So we talked
Yeah.
about the application of this kind of belief, that how to make a better society. That I am for it. I think maybe we don't have that much free will that we believed. And you mentioned about the environment, about the poor people that they were born in somewhere in Africa, that they don't have all of the luck that I had to grow up in a good family. And I had an uncle 40 years ago was in US, and he was my role model, and I could
Mm.
progress and came here to US ultimately. But anyway, not all people they have this luck or chance, that I think we can maybe help each other to provide more chance for each other. So one question also here about inequality, again, this continuing what you mentioned. So about the role of political institutions or the regulatory agencies with the advancements of these technologies, including AI, biotech, or even gene editing or whatever. So what is the role? I think there's two questions. What is a concern about the inequality if with advancement of this superconvergence, and how the politicians or regulatory agencies they can work together or minimize this kind of monopoly or like inequality around the
Yeah.
world.
So inequality, big picture, is something that's very dangerous. And when we see societies like America, frankly, and like Iran, both right now, there that when the inequality becomes so great, it can be destabilizing. Uh, Also, inequality of access to life-changing technologies. We look at what happened when European military technology was so many generations beyond others, that was abused. At the same time, however, all technology starts somewhere, and so all technology is always uneven in the beginning. So we shouldn't be against uneven access or uneven technological development. That is the nature of technological development. What we need to do is to say, for everything, who are we? What do we stand for? What are we trying to achieve? Even separate from the question of technology. And then the question is, well, how can technology be used in service of those goals? I say this over and over. If the question is the first question is how should we use technology? It's the wrong first question. The first question needs to be questions need to be who are we? What do we stand for? What are we trying to achieve? And then how can we use or collaborate with these technologies in order to achieve that? And so governments have a very, very important role to play. And there are some people, I totally disagree with them, these libertarians. And ironically, you can be a libertarian here in the United States because you have all of these infrastructures and superstructures that other people have built. I was in Afghanistan uh, when their civil war was raging. Nobody was a libertarian. Everybody wanted a functioning government so they could actually live their lives. So there is a very important role for governments and for regulation, but that's not enough. Our World Health Organization Expert Committee on Human Genome Editing, in our final report, we talked about the need for a broad governance structure at every level. And governance is what happens individually, family, company, organization, local, regional, national, international, global. These changes that are happening are so profound that what we need to do is have everybody working together in some way. And again, that doesn't mean equal distribution everywhere. I actually am an accelerationist in the sense that I don't think it's possible to put our foot on the brake of AI development at this stage of the game. But what we need to do is to put our foot more on the gas for public dialogue, education, engagement, empowerment, talking about what are the values that are guiding us, principles, liability for abuse. I mean, right now, we've in the United States, we've torn our country apart by social media because we have Section 230 of the Telecommunication Act, which said basically that social media companies aren't accountable for the content that they publish. And that means that they've all come to the conclusion, well, we should just prioritize engagement. And humans, because of our evolutionary past, get super engaged when we're angry. And so they're just pushing us to these extremes, and everybody's at each other's throats, and our society is coming apart. And so it's essential that we have liability. That if we have AI companies and they're teaching everybody, how to make bioweapons at home, like there must be liability. So this is, I've said this many times, but the competition isn't at the AI model level. The competition is at the societal level, and so we're competing between societies. But the answer, if a society says we're just going to put our foot on the gas of of AI system development and nothing else, it's like driving your sports car around the city with your foot entirely on the gas. Pretty soon you're going to crash.
Thank you. So I had a guest, Kelsey Johnson, Professor Kelsey Johnson from Virginia University. She's an astrophysicist, and then she was a president or vice president of the United States Astrophysics Society.
Mm-hmm.
She, her book we are translating. The book name
Yeah.
is Into the Unknown. She's discussing about a few ways that why we don't see the like super intelligence outside the Earth. One of the things that she brought in this book is might be there was technologies or like similar thing that we are developing right now somewhere else in the Milky Way or outside, but they destroyed themselves. Like
Yes, I've
because
heard
when
that.
they reach to the adolescence that we are right now, they could not continue and they destroyed and went extinct. So do you see such scenario might be happening if we don't regulate what the technology that we have and
Yeah,
super intelligence like AI? Some people concerned about the general AI, the robots can take control us. So, and also,
yeah,
there are some discussion that AI companies need some be to be more regulated by federal
yeah,
agencies. So, what do you think about
yeah.
this
Well,
kind of a scary scenario for the
yeah,
future?
yeah. So I'll take a few things in your question. First, it is I've heard the thesis many times before that there's a level of development where you have the capacity to kill everybody, and then everybody does it over and over. I don't find that. Excuse me. I don't find that entirely convincing
Mm,
because based on that logic, let's say there's life, which I believe actually distributed around the universe. Some of it would be a billion years ahead, and some would be a billion years behind, and some might do a better job of laying moral foundations. And so there would, just based on that, in my view, there would be enough diversity that somebody would find us if that was the only thing. My feeling, because I do believe that because life emerged so quickly here, it was only half a billion or a little more than half a billion years from when Earth formed to when life sprung up. And it just seemed, in the grand scheme of things, that seems pretty easy. And so I think it's just that the universe is so big that to get to there's one thing of doing something like we're doing on our little planet, And then it's another thing to send things out that are going so far out into space, which is so vast. And so, if you're, what's the chance that somebody driving around is going to run into one of our probes or even a radio wave that would be discernible? So, but I do think that as our capacities become greater, our ability to come together and to recognize our common humanity becomes greater. And that's what my new book, The AI 10 Commandments, is all about. And our ability to kill each other also becomes greater because the same drivers are pushing both of those things in the same direction. So yes, there are existential potential benefits and existential potential risks. I don't think that either is predetermined. I don't think there are some people who are techno optimists who say this is just bound to end well. I don't think that's true. And there are some people who are techno pessimists who say it's inevitable that this will end poorly. I don't think that's true. But I can guarantee you that there will be some really exciting highs, like curing diseases or being beneficiaries of all those poor, currently uneducated kids who are going to be writing beautiful novels and symphonies and poems and all of those other things. And there will be terrible things that happen, whether it's mass killings in wars or synthetic biology related pandemics or all sorts of other things. And that's the case. I mean, if you trace back human history over the last 12,000 years, it's a pretty great story. I mean, that we live longer, we're just better off in kind of most every way, not all of us, but many of us. But the dips are like the Black Plague and the Second World War. I mean, the dips, the 100 Years' War, which was even longer than 100 years, the dips are huge dips. And so even if the trajectory is toward better, like we shouldn't want to have to go through those horrible dips.
I fully agree. I am more optimistic, similar to you, about the humanity. I know some people look at the empty part of it, but I think we need to be
Yep.
regulating all of these technologies. But
Yes. Yeah.
as you said, I'm also working in some of these fields, and then I know how much progress we did, and we are not far from maybe doing some good cancer treatment or
Yeah. Very
using
much.
different. I think in the book you talk about the CAR-T, about new
Yeah.
generation of vaccines. Because of the time, we don't have time to go into
But
deep
let
of
me
these,
let me
but these are technologies that are really
yeah.
advancing right now.
Well, let me tell you, because while I was writing that chapter, my own now late father was diagnosed with cancer. And so I went to my dad and he said, "Well, I want to fight this." And I said, "Great, I'm going to be by your side." And I said, "But my goal is let's treat this like it's 10 years in the future and not 10 years in the past." So he had a wonderful oncologist, and the oncologist gave me his plan. And I said, "Well, here's my thought of why I think we should do things a little bit differently." And so we did, and we used all of these technologies. And my dad was supposed to live for 1 year, and instead he lived for 3 years. And we had all of these incredible experiences. Actually, I wrote a feature on this, a big feature for a magazine called AARP, the magazine, which it is the largest physically circulated magazine in the world. And today, actually, I just before getting on this conversation with you, I was informed that feature had won a big award. So I'm happy about that, not for the award, but because I have a whole action plan for what anyone can and should do following their own cancer diagnosis or a diagnosis of someone they love. So this will ensure that more people are able to benefit. And that's the point that you're making and I'm making, is that there are these big ideas, but the big ideas have specific applications. And that's where the rubber hits the road. And that's where people can be really helped in very magical ways.
That's just in the field that I'm working, maybe still, for example, the CAR-T field is still
Yeah.
expensive. So
Yes.
similar to what you mentioned, maybe when I was child, there was no cell phone, and maybe when I was teenager, only maybe rich people they had cell phones.
Yeah.
And my uncle was describing to me when he was kids, there was no watch, and then
Yeah.
not many people they had watch. Now many people, like almost everybody, they have watch. Even almost everybody, they can buy at least some sort of cell phones.
Yeah.
So at
Yeah.
the beginning, people are going, no, it will
Yes,
be
exactly.
inequality. And
Yep.
then, but these technologies also, we are in the field of biotech and cell therapy, gene therapy. Everybody, all the scientists, they're working to see if they can bring the cost down. And it takes
Yes.
time, similar to the time that we had antibiotic that was expensive like 50 years ago. Now it's not much expensive. Everybody can afford one
Right.
antibiotic.
Yep.
I think cell and gene therapy is the same field that maybe
Yep.
hopefully in the next decade or so, it can
Yep.
be affordable for everybody. Maybe before I go to the last two books and also some of your exercise habit that I learned from talking to Peter Singer, that you are very good marathon runner.
Yes.
So let's look at ahead, like
Yeah.
in 2050, for example. How do you think everyday human life will differ? When we look back like 30 years ago, as I said, there was no internet. We couldn't believe that one day that I'm sitting with you and then we can talk. I talked to Peter from Australia and then everybody
Yep.
from one place.
Yep.
But now I think as a futuristic person, so how do you see 2050s, like around 20 years
Yeah.
from now, 25 years, human relationships, these three
Yeah.
technologies that you discussed, and how it means to human in 30
Yeah.
years?
So I'll say a few different things at different ends of the spectrum. So in terms of health, I think we're going to have continuous sensing. And so we're going to have sensors inside of us, on us, around us. And so we're not, what we call healthcare is really symptom-based sick care. And so we're going to have continuous self-monitoring, and therefore our healthcare is going to move toward being more predictive and preventive, which is will be much better. I'm hopeful that we'll have new ways of growing not just food, but agricultural raw materials and other things that we need in far more sustainable ways than we do now. And I'm quite certain, and this is my new novel is about this. I'm quite certain that people who are saying now, "Oh, our machines will never be creative," are going to be having very creative, very thoughtful, very deep, even romantic relationships with machines. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to value our relationship with humans. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to value our relationships with humans more than ever. And that's why I tell people now, if you want to prepare for the future, you should live decent parts of your life at two ends of the same spectrum. On one hand, what you need to be doing is learning everything about AI and the new technologies, how they apply in your life, in your work, how you can use them more effectively, and what your value system is so that these capabilities are serving you and you aren't just surrendering your privacy or your identity in service of some technology, or more likely the corporation that is running that technology. At the other end of the spectrum, there's no possible way that we're going to be able to do this unless we don't live a very serious percentage of our lives completely separate from technology. As technology becomes more powerful and more pervasive, living a very significant portion of life completely cut off from technology is going to be more important than ever before. As exciting as our technologies are, 4 billion years of evolutionary biology is much more complex, much more sophisticated, much more interesting. And so I think we're going to need to recognize that in all sorts of ways. And just one final process point is that we're already entering a phase of recursive self-improvement by our AI systems. So Anthropic just released its letter saying that a year ago, AI systems were writing about 10% of the code of their most advanced systems, and now they're up to 80%. So where does it go after 80, 90, 95, 99? Humans will be in this hopefully oversight kind of role. But as this level of improvement happens, we're going to see an intelligence explosion. And it's not just going to be abstract on computer screens, it's going to come out into the world. It's going to be embodied. And we're going to have AI systems developing their own physical and other physical manifestations. So all of this technology, which we see as virtual, we're going to see the lines between virtual and physical are going to become so blurry that those words, we won't even use those words in those contexts. As I've said, it's not that there's real life and there's virtual life. It's there is real life, and it has physical and virtual elements. And so, in order to think about what all this means, everybody needs to start thinking like a science fiction writer, because that's what accelerating change means. Is that the future? If you pick a unit increment into the future, it's more different now to that point in the future has greater change than that same period of time ago to now.
Great. About your last two books. So, for some of the audience, I think Jamie talked about this in the Lives Well Lived podcast with Peter
Yes.
Singer in more detail about the AI's 10 commanders, how
Yes.
it developed, and then how it get generated an interaction of Jamie with AI, ChatGPT 5, I guess. But for the audience that they don't know or they don't want to go there, but
Yeah.
briefly mention that about the concept of this book and your new book also.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. So 2 years ago, I was invited to give a talk at a major institute here on the future of AI. And I gave a talk in the 6,000 person auditorium, amphitheater. I got a big standing ovation, and they invited me back the next summer, which was last summer. And they said, speak about anything. And this institution, which is called Chautauqua, is all about, it's been around for more than 150 years. It's all about religious pluralism. And so I decided that I wanted to talk about AI and spirituality. And so, like I do with any of these projects, I went to the park and I went for a walk. I didn't have any technology, and I just thought deeply about what I wanted to say. And then I put my talk together and I went and I gave it. And in the talk, I talked about the relationship between all of our religious and spiritual traditions and technologies. Certainly, Islam and Judaism and Christianity are all agricultural religions. Protestantism is deeply connected to the printing press. So there's always a connection between our traditions and technologies. And then I went through the biblical 10 commandments and I read them literally. And when you read them literally, people think, oh, that's what it says. I'm not going to covet my neighbor's ox. My neighbor doesn't have an ox. I live in an apartment in New York City. And then I talked about how I'd collaborated with GPT-5 to mine the entire recorded history of humanity, including all of our different religious, spiritual, moral, and ethical traditions, to come up with 10 universal principles that, if followed by everybody, would lead to the greatest amounts of peace and happiness. And in thousands of back and forths, I said, where is this coming from? And let's explore. And it was coming from all of our different traditions in a very beautiful way. And the AI was able to see us collectively, kind of like the Artemis 2 astronauts can see our planet when looking back from space. And I thought that was really beautiful. And so I wrote this book. And when I was done with the book, I was thinking, well, I can't put my name alone on the cover of the book because the book is describing a very deep collaboration between me and AI. And if I had some kind of brilliant autistic person who was my collaborator and they had read every book in the history of humanity and I'd collaborated with them, I wouldn't not put their name on the cover of the book. So I decided to do it. And so that's the new book, The AI 10 Commandments. And the other book, as I mentioned before, Virtuosa, which is coming in February, it's, as I said, about the intersection of AI, robotics, and classical music. Because I do think that our machines are going to be creative in ways that will challenge us. Doesn't mean in exactly the same ways as us, but creative in ways that we will recognize. As a matter of fact, will be designed so that we can recognize them. And I just think that as a novelist, an artist, that's the job of every artist, is to say, what does that mean on a human level? And I mean, there's the glib things that people say, AI will never be creative, AI will never think. Who knows? But it's certainly going to feel a lot like AI is thinking as it does now. It's going to feel a lot like AI is being creative. And the things being created will be creative based on any standard of creativity. And even the issue that you mentioned before of consciousness, Like I think I'm conscious because I can have a sense of what it's like to be. I think I'm conscious because I can have a sense of what it's like to be me, and that feels like something. But if everybody else in the world was replaced with a simulacrum, and everybody else didn't have that same consciousness of me, and they were just pretending, but they were pretending in exactly the same way that they would if they did have consciousness, I just wouldn't have a way really of knowing that. And so whether AI is conscious, as some people including Jeff Hinton believe, or it's not, I mean, it's an interesting question. It'll have something to say with the kind of rights issues that Peter and Kasia are so great at exploring. But we're entering into just a new phase, and people have a hard time imagining that we are in the radical phase. If you think, oh, life can't change that much, think of the difference between your life, our life, and the life of our hunter-gatherer nomadic ancestors. It's radical. If you were to go back 13,000 years ago and say, just describe this conversation, it would be mind-boggling, literally in every aspect. I mean, and so because people feel like the thing they know comes from time immemorial, they have a hard time imagining radical change. The second you think of our experience along the fuller spectrum of time, the more you realize that we've had absolutely radical changes in the way that we live, and it's radical for maybe a generation, and then it just becomes, oh yeah, that's called living.
Great. So for some audience and viewers, I had some guests. We talked about consciousness, some of the new theories, like scientific theories, also philosophy also involved. It was in the realm of philosophy before, now science, also neuroscience especially, talking about, and there are some good theories since IIT or global workspace. So they are thinking, especially Christoph Koch, that we are also translating his book. He's a University of California, I guess, professor. So he's talking about that if complex AI gets so complex, it may reach to some kind of level of consciousness that it's hard to prove. That also the hard problem of consciousness that David Chalmers mentioned. We
Yes.
cannot see, okay, even my dog, I don't know how she
Yeah. How
feels,
would you know?
or even
Yeah.
like an AI, if we pretend to feel, what is more our moral responsibility to think about
Yeah.
that? If a AI
Yes.
in the future robot says, I feel pain, what should I do, or what should we
Yeah.
can do,
And
or
who knows whether it feels or doesn't feel pain. If it says
yeah,
I feel pain, what do we do? And like with your dog, like what is dog consciousness? How would we
exactly,
know? There was a famous
exactly,
paper. There was a famous paper. Um, what it feels like to be a bat.
to be
We
a
don't know
bat,
what it
yeah.
feels like to be a bat, and so it could be that we'll have AI systems that are thinking with a different framework than ours, and we won't recognize it. Just like humans used to abuse animals because there was this sense that, oh, they're not feeling anything. We used to do surgery on babies without anesthesia because there
Mm.
was a thing, oh, they're not feeling it, even though they were screaming. And so yes, I mean, these are really
Mm.
important
The-
questions, and we may not be able to answer them, but we have to try.
we have to discuss about that.
Yeah.
There was a report a few months ago about the AI system of robots talking to his owner or her owner, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think he was telling that I would like to unplug you or turn off you, and he was threatening the owner that I will reveal all of your secrets, for
Yeah.
example. So it may happen. Is we are
Yeah.
laughing, but if it happens, so what we can do? So AI
Yeah.
get
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is,
threatening us.
it's true, but I write about this in my books. It's like we're training a child, a toddler.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so what we need to do is discuss with ourselves, what are our values? We need to layer our values into these systems. And whether it's through something like the Anthropic Constitution, whether it's through governance mechanisms, regulatory, case law, liability, all of those things, we need to make sure that humans and our values and our goals are part of the architecture of what's happening.
Thank you so much, Jamie. After studying decades about humanity, great risk or achievements, so I would like to end this conversation with something we can hear from you that how would you like to live to people trying to prepare for the world of tomorrow, especially talk to mostly Iranians because my audience are Iranians in the developing countries. I know that some of the Americans or English speakers will watch this as well, but I think if you want to talk directly to mostly Iranians to be prepared for the future, even though they are in the developing countries, but they are using all of these technologies, but may not be have access to all of the genetic tools or biotechnology still. But I think ultimately it will happen for even the developing countries. As an end point of this conversation, anything you want to discuss about the
Yes.
future for developed
Yeah.
countries or developing
Yeah.
countries? Yeah.
So I would say for all of us, life is a sine curve. Things get better, things get worse, and we just got to hang in there. I know how much suffering people are experiencing in Iran, and it's heartbreaking that these amazing, brilliant people, and if you are somebody listening to this podcast right now in Iran, I see you, I feel for you. I'm so sorry, and I hope that we can come together as one humanity, and that you will not be in such a terrible situation as you're in right now, and that this future that will have so many different components. So even people who don't have access to the latest AI models or whatever, we're all figuring this out, and part of that requires exploration and play and open-mindedness. And it's not necessarily the case that the people with the greatest access will have the greatest insights. As a matter of fact, in the early days of the computer revolution, one of the reasons why we have so many great, at least first generation programmers came from inside the Soviet Union, is they kind of had nothing. And so they had to think their way through problems. And so I do think that Iranians, with whatever tools we all have, we need to be saying, well, what can we do with these tools? How can we solve problems? Innovation doesn't always happen at the greatest frontier of technological advancement. Sometimes it's people elsewhere. I mean, like these small scale ultrasounds that were developed in India just because they couldn't get the bigger machines. So play, explore, but the main thing that we're all doing is something that we can do everywhere. It's things that happened in the concentration camps in Europe. Like what is the thing that we're fighting for? We're not fighting for technology. We're fighting for love and opportunity and potential and all of those things. And so again, if somebody is in Iran right now with all of the pain and all of the hardship and all of the suffering, and they're watching a podcast with the limited electricity and limited bandwidth. I mean, you watching this, you really are my hero and inspiration, and we just have to keep at it, and hopefully there'll be better days in the future.
Thank you, Jamie. I think you are already, as I mentioned, well known in Iran for the people who already read this. I'm hoping that after the translation of the Superconvergence, I can maybe introduce you more Iranians who are interested in these concepts. That there are many, as I know. I
Wonderful.
think they have limitations, internet issue, but they try, and there are
Yeah,
many sharp and intelligent people inside Iran as well as scientists. But hopefully, after the translation gets released, I can maybe invite you to a short meeting and conversation,
my
just
pleasure.
briefly, maybe talk about the edition and it cause maybe more introduction of the
Wonderful.
book in the Iranian market. Thank you so much, Jamie, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you for giving me time to host you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.